Hi, I'm Jeannie Chan. I've been a marketer for nearly a decade, and as a marketer, I always say the consumer is at the heart of it all. So in this class, let's dive a little bit more deeply into the consumer and how they make the decision to buy, how they start thinking about buying anything at all, and how they finally decide to buy your brand. We'll look at the entire journey and see how we can persuade the consumer toward making the choice that you want them to make and making the decision to buy your brand. We'll look at the different moments where your brand may win or lose and put together a plan that will enable your brand to win in the marketplace. I hope I'll see you in class.
Let's get started with the consumer decision journey. The consumer decision journey is a framework that's put together by McKinsey & Company, a very prestigious consulting firm that has helped Fortune 500 companies solve numerous business problems. This is a framework that talks about the journey with which a consumer goes through to make a purchase decision. You can see how this may be relevant. If we know the journey that the consumer goes through in making a decision, we can potentially influence that journey and guide their decision toward the one we want them to make, which is to buy our brand. The journey starts at the trigger, then goes into initial consideration, active evaluation, and then purchase. But it doesn't end there. There's the post-purchase experience, and then, possibly, a loyalty loop that leads to repurchase. Let's look at each stage a little deeper. Let's start at the trigger. At the trigger phase, a need to purchase has become apparent to the consumer. The consumer enters the category to consider a purchase. Then the whole journey starts, and it starts at the initial consideration stage. The consumer forms an initial list of brands for consideration. This list is based on general brand perception or exposure. This is when brand choice starts to form. Now, hopefully your brand may be already on this list, but that doesn't mean it will stay on this list. And if you're not in this initial list, there's still a chance to get on it. And that takes us to the next stage, which is the active evaluation stage. Consumer evaluates and researches his or her needs and adds and subtracts the brand to form from the consideration list and forms a new list. This is when consumer researchers do their research, and this is a chance when even if you are on the list initially, you can get knocked off, or if you were not on the list initially, they may discover your brand and get added on. So this is a very important research phase. And then leads us to purchase. After all the research is done, the consumer makes a final decision to purchase a specific brand. After the purchase, the consumer experiences the purchase for the first time and evaluates the experience against his or her expectation. Does it live up to what he or she thinks the product should do based on his or her research? And if there's a positive post-purchase experience, a loyalty loop may be formed, which can lead to a repurchase and enable the brand to be considered first the next time a need for purchase arises. And that's the overall framework. A trigger, initial consideration, active evaluation, purchase, post-purchase, and then potentially a loyalty loop. Let's look at a couple examples. First example, trigger. My laptop is starting to run a little sluggish, a little slow. A need for a new computer starts to become apparent to me. Initial consideration. Okay, I've used Dell before, so Dell is a brand that's on my initial list, but I'm also adding Apple onto this list just based on things that I have heard, based on my brand perception, based on the exposure I have to the brand. So on my initial consideration list, I have Dell and Apple. Active evaluation. This is when I research. I'll read reviews on both brands. I'll ask my friends on their experiences on either brand, or maybe they'll even have new brands for me to consider. They may make new recommendation. They may want to steer me one way or another. I may go into the stores and try each of them out and see which one I like more. This active evaluation can take days, weeks, or even months. And then finally, I've done all my research, I made a decision. I order a Mac online and picked it up at the store. Purchase. Post-purchase, there was a little bit of transition, but once I get the hang of it, the Apple computer works great. So that positive experience created a loyalty loop. I'm a convert. My next laptop will be an Apple laptop. There are a few things I want to point out in this particular example. First, the trigger. The trigger is when a need for a purchase becomes apparent to the consumer. Now, this could be a sudden need, like my laptop stopped working and I need one immediately. Or it could be something that's a building need, such as it's starting to run slower and slower and it's starting to I think I need a new computer. So a trigger can be something that is immediate or something that is slowly building. All it means is that the consumer is becoming aware that he or she wants to buy something. Another thing that I want to point out is the active evaluation. This is the research phase. For a purchase decision such as a laptop computer, this research can take weeks or months. Go to store a few times, try it out a few times, play with it a few times, and then sometimes in United States where return is available, so the active evaluation can even be as much as buy it, try it at home, and then really make that decision on keeping it or not keeping it. So the active evaluation is something that takes potentially a long time. The research can take a long time. Now let's take a look at another example. Example 2, trigger. I came across the candy aisle at the checkout. Initial consideration. Trident gum and menthol both look kind of fun. They're both right there. Active evaluation. Well, all the menthols right here are mints, and there's some fun fruity things from Trident. I feel like something fruity. So my purchase decision was, I'm going to pick up this particular Trident gum. Post-purchase. It was good. I was thinking something fruity, but my expectation was that it was something going to be sweet, but it's actually sour. So the loyalty loop, which is not created in this case because the product did not match my expectation. So it's good, but if next time I want something, I may consider something else. So I want to point out in this example a few different things. First, trigger. This trigger is something external. It's the candy that's displayed there at the checkout. It could be a in-store display. You could have read in a magazine article a new product is available that made you become aware that you want to buy something. So contrast this from the previous example, where the previous example is something you start to want to buy something, whereas this example is something external that triggered you to want to buy something. Also, very different between these two examples, and I specifically wanted to have these two contrasting examples, is that in this example, this whole journey may be seconds or minutes. The previous could be days, weeks, and months. And in this particular example, because it's such a short journey, some of these steps happen in mere seconds, and the initial consideration and active evaluation is more or less happening at the same time. Now, of course, this is an example where a loyalty loop is not created. Other thing to also point out, and this candy example is a great example to look at, is that just because someone enters the decision journey doesn't mean that they will complete it. In the active evaluation, in this case, let's say they may look at candy and then their eye got caught to a magazine or something. they could have leave this journey entirely because the magazine triggered a whole new journey. So just something for you to think about, as today's world where there's a lot of stimuli to consumer, that each phase could be where a consumer get a step closer to buying you, or it's also a potential exit point from buying you or buying your category at all. So now that we get a little bit more familiar with this particular framework, we'll go a little bit deeper in our next modules. Now, let's turn concepts into actions by creating a plan. In this module, we're going to look at the consumer decision journey again, with trigger, initial consideration, active evaluation, purchase, then the post-purchase experience, which will drive the loyalty loop. As we put together this plan, there are several strategic objectives, and each of them are important, and you have to have them in order to win in the marketplace. And they tie very closely to the consumer decision journey. The first objective is awareness in the trigger phase. Once they have a need to buy, they have to be aware of you. Then consideration. In the initial consideration stage, you want to drive consideration, drive them to consider your brand. Preference. In the active evaluation, you want to drive preference. You want them to prefer your brand over a competitor. Conversion. At purchase, you want to turn that browser into a buyer. You want to convert a browser to a buyer. You want that purchase to happen. And then finally, you want to drive loyalty. Hopefully, you'll be able to create a brand ambassador within the ultimate moment of truth, and also can lead to repurchase. There are several considerations that you need to think through as you build that plan. Enabler. What pushes the consumer into each phase? You want them to continue to drive them toward purchase and drive them toward purchasing your brand. Barriers. What keeps your brand from winning at each of those stages? Unique selling points. What is unique that is from your brand that will help you overcome those barriers? Tactics. What tactic will you employ to promote your unique selling points? Desired response. What is your ideal outcome when you do employ your tactics? As we go through, this is the part where you start to turn concept into action and start to turn my lecture and the idea that I'm telling you into how you will apply to your brand. So as I go through, I'm going to give you a few examples, fairly generic examples, but now it's your job to think it in the lens of your brand, think it in the lens of your product, and how does it apply to your product. So let's start with trigger. Some examples of enablers. Maybe a need for replacement, a need for an occasion. Someone may have a need to buy a wedding dress because she's getting married. So there's a need, which is a consumer created enablers. Externally created enablers, which could be advertising, friends' recommendations, celebrity influence, or in my previous examples, candies available at an aisle. Those could all be triggers. These are example triggers. And enable someone to get into the trigger phase. And then barriers. Maybe there's lack of a need. If there's no need for something, this is when sometimes consumers say create a need, right? And you can create a need potentially through some of the tactic that I'm going to talk about. Lack of awareness. If they're not aware that a product category exists, they're not going to have a need for it. If all they know that exists is cookie and they do not have an awareness of a vegan cookie, even though they are vegan, they're not going to be thinking about buying a cookie at all. Unique selling points. What are something that's about you that's unique? Perhaps it's the vegan, right? Maybe new and better technology. Maybe you have a new technology that is going to trigger someone to consider buying new. For example, now in maybe HD TV, someone's TV works perfectly fine, but now that they're aware of HD TV, ooh, HD TV, now I want an HD TV. So there could be something like that that triggers someone into a purchase. Tactic, advertising, PR. If it's something that's externally create a trigger, you need to put it in place. So what would those be? Desired response. I could use a new one. Oh, I didn't know about this, but this is cool. I would consider buying. So you want to create something to trigger someone into entering into the category and considering buying something. So here's the exercise for you. What are the enablers for your brand to trigger your consumers? What are barriers for your brand? What are the unique selling points for your brand that could trigger a purchase? What tactics are you employing or can you employ to create an awareness? What are the desired responses for your brand? So take a moment and think about these questions. In the trigger phase, what are your enablers, barriers, unique selling points, tactics, and desired responses? Now moving into the initial consideration. Some example of enablers could be, I have heard of this brand, I have had good experience with this brand, I've seen advertising from this brand, my friend recommended this brand. Remember, in initial consideration, it's all about that like initial list of brand. So anything that's expose your brand to the consumer are enabler. Barrier, on the other hand, could be exposure from competitive brand or lack of exposure from your brand. If they have not heard from your brand, if they don't know your brand, then that is a barrier. Or if they hear everything, all they know is a competitive brand, then it's a barrier. This is often something that is more difficult potentially for new brand or new product into the category, because the initial consideration set is all built around brand exposure. So it favors existing brand or the predominant brand. So something to think about, what are the enabler or the barriers? And barrier could be lack of exposure from your brand. Unique selling point, something new, something unique, something better. If you're a new brand, for example, what is something that is so unique about you that the other brands out in the world haven't addressed? The difference between the trigger and initial consideration is that initial consideration is really now move into a brand. Trigger is just thinking about the category in general, vegan cookie versus cookie. Whereas in initial consideration, you are a special vegan cookie. You are the first brand with vegan cookie that may be locally sourced, for example. So, but it's your brand that is now being considered. It's not just a vague product concept or product idea or category. It's now moved down to the brand level. Tactic. Again, how do you get your brand out there? Initial consideration is all about brand exposure. So how do you expose your brand? What are the different touch points that you can use to touch the consumer with your brand? Advertising, brand ambassador, or CRM, consumer relations management. Now think about it in the laptop example, for example, right? If you know that your computer may be sometimes computer maybe have a life of like a 2 year, so you know that there is going to be a need. You know that will start to trigger a consumer to think about a new computer. Now you know that they probably have exposure to your brand based on they've used your brand before, but you want to really kind of get them from the initial consideration into the next phase as soon as possible to keep that list short and maybe just to have your brand and not other brand. So maybe you have a email to them that kind of tell them, oh, we have this new model, it's great, it's on sale. Kind of get them to get your brand on that list and move on. So the desired response is, I want to learn more about what this brand has to offer. They are now considering your brand, going into the research phase. So the exercise, think about the enablers for your brand that will put your brand into that initial short list. What are the barriers for your brand? What are the unique selling points for your brand that could drive considerations for your brand? What tactics are you employing or can you employ for your brand? What are the desired responses for your brand? Again, thinking about initial consideration, if you are already a brand that someone uses, likely you're already in that list. So you want to make sure that they kind of get to the next phase as soon as possible so that they don't grow that short list beyond you. If you're a brand new brand, so this is where you want to drive some brand awareness and drive some consideration for your brand specifically. Lack of exposure from your brand is likely the biggest barrier. So how do you expose your brand? So once you get them to the active evaluation phase, some of the enabler could be the unique selling point for this brand is interesting to me. Price is right. I trust this brand. This is all the research, right? So it could be about what's unique, what's cool about your brand, maybe the brand story about your brand. Price matters is all part of the product proposition. Barrier. Maybe a competitive brand looks more interesting. Another barrier is if I cannot tell the difference between brand A and brand B, well then there's no real things that's gonna help them make a decision between brand A or brand B. I don't know what's unique about this brand. If I cannot choose between brand A or brand B, I'm gonna stay researching. Again, you want to guide them toward purchase. You want to guide them toward your brand choice. So you want to help them understand why your brand is the brand for them. If they can't tell the difference between brand A and brand B, they're not going to move forward. Or a more risky situation is that they abandon brand A and brand B at all and go to brand C. So you want to make sure that you are communicating your unique selling points. Unique selling point could be superior claims, more positive review, awards, endorsement. What about you that's unique that makes you uniquely right for the consumer? Tactic could be a website. Your website is going to be likely where you have all these information. Think back. 0 moment the truth is tied to research, tied to this active evaluation phase. Online presence is very critical in this part of the consumer journey for many products. There are exceptions, but for many, web are very important. Third-party website. Other website may host positive reviews for you. Any other way that you can get your story out there? Brochure. Point of sales material. Maybe a sign that's in front of your product on the shelf. Packaging. People are standing in front of the shelf, looking, thinking, okay, well, what's the difference between these two cookies? So the different ways to tell them why should they prefer you over another brand? The desired response is, I think this is a better brand. You want to guide them toward making the decision to prefer your brand over all others. So here's the exercise. What are enablers for your brand? In driving active evaluation, what are the barriers? What are unique selling points that will drive preference for your brand? What tactics are you employing or can you employ for your brand? What are the desired responses for your brand? Finally, purchase. Enabler. Strong merchandising. Good shelf impact. In stock. Again, this is the first moment of truth. They're in front of the shelf. They're ready to buy. You want to make sure that they pick you versus getting distracted by a competitive product. It has to be in stock. If they're ready to buy you, they go to the shelf, you are out of stock, they're gonna maybe pick up whatever that's available out there, which is the competitor. So this is the first moment of truth. This is the moment where you win or lose. Barrier. Autopilot shopping. They're just kind of going there and they just pick up whatever is familiar, and they may have thought about your brand, but then they just kind of went into autopilot and then didn't think. Hard to find, out of stock. If they can't find you, they can't buy you. Unique selling point. Again, good packaging, strong claim. This is at the moment of purchase. You want to have that clear reasons to believe. You want to have that just clear reason to buy you. Quick, clear, concise. Package and product detail page. Again, thinking back to the first moment of truth at purchase. that clear reason to buy. Desired response: I will buy this brand. So in the exercise, think about the enabler for your brand. Barriers: what are unique selling points that will drive conversion for your brand? What tactics are you employing or can you employ for your brand? And then what are the desired responses for your brand? Finally, post-purchase. Enabler example would be, it exceeded my expectation. I had a good product experience. Barriers: it did not align with my expectation, or it was below my expectations. Again, these are things that you can manage. This goes back to the second moment of truth. Post-purchase care is very important. Unique selling point hopefully is better than expected results. Tactic, again, consumer relations management. It could be emails that kind of tell them how, share with them how-to videos, or again, social media channel. Thinking about how can you help them create that positive post-purchase experience. And then also in this is where it also creates that loyalty loop, right? So you want to drive loyalty. So you also want to win the ultimate moment of truth. So CRM may be nudging them to share their good experience once you do have that good experience. The desired response ultimately is that I will post a positive review. I will recommend to a friend. That's what you hope that they will do. That's the ultimate win, that they become your brand ambassadors. Exercise. What are the enablers for your brand? What are the barriers? What are the unique selling points that will drive loyalty for your brand? What tactics are you employing or can you employ for your brand? What are the desired responses for your brand?
Congratulations! You finished your course. If you have enjoyed the course and found the material useful, please do leave a review. It'll help others discover this class and help them develop their skills. If you would like to engage further, make sure to follow me on Twitter at Jeannie_Chan. Also, check out my blog, CuriousMarketeer.com, to stay up to date on new tips and tricks in the trade. Sign up for the newsletter and the tips and tricks go directly into your inbox. Finally, if you want to check out any more of my work or how I can help you grow your business, check out my website, JeannieChan.com. There I will show you my portfolio and we can connect even further. I hope you've enjoyed the course and see you around.